Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my review and my discussion on the book Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty. Here it is. And we've discussed so far part one, part two, and now is our final discussion. We're wrapping it up, this conversation on the book Think Like a Monk, and we are ending it with part three, which is the final part of this book. And now, here is my final 5 takeaways of Jay Shetty's book, Think Like a Monk. So, takeaway one is the conversation on gratitude and how it affects us and our mental health, and how it helps us to build better relationships with others. He talks about practicing gratitude, and a good time to do that is in that routine we talked about in part two, is a part of that routine where we actually practice gratitude by writing in our journal, sharing thankfulness and being gracious to others that we come across with for any reasons. And he tells a story about Brian Acton. And Brian Acton interviewed at different places such as Twitter and Facebook. And guess what? Brian was turned down. And each time he was turned down or he did not get the job, he shared it on social media. And on social media, for example, he says he didn't get the job, he was rejected, but he's grateful because to work. But in his free time, he worked on an app. And guess what? Later on, Facebook bought that app for $19 billion from Brian. And it is the app that people use now called WhatsApp. And this creator talked about, and Jay mentioned him in the book for the way he displayed gratitude, even though these big companies rejected him. And he did not focus on that rejection. Instead, he focused on a part of it that he was grateful for and continued to work really hard and ended up actually making a lot more money that they would have paid him had he been working for the company. So he said to be grateful of setbacks. Something better is around the corner. That is my takeaway one. Now let's move on to takeaway two. So most of us have heard of the terminology karma. What you give is what you get back in return, right? Well, there's nothing incorrect about that. It's what you give out in the universe, you get back in return. Your actions, whether good or bad, bring back the same or similar to you. And in my takeaway two, the biggest part of my takeaway two in Jay's book was the discussion on relationship. Jay says in his book, an issue we have is that we expect that who we love will love us back the same way. So just keep in mind that what you give out to an individual, you may not get back from that specific individual. So you have to know that love will come back, may not come back from that person, but it will come back to you in a different way from someone else. So be mindful that Jay says that we expect a person to be the complete package, right? And giving us everything. But no one's the complete package. You will get bits of pieces of what you need from different people at different times. Just be mindful of what you're giving out in the universe. That's my takeaway too. Takeaway 3 from Jay Shetty's book, Think Like a Monk. This is part 3, which, is about giving. And we talked about giving gratitude. We talked about giving love, or what you're giving out into the universe. Now we're going to talk about family. So he says, and my takeaway 3 is learning that we need to accept that the people who raised us may not be able to give us what we need. Okay? We're not talking necessarily about tangible things, such as, you graduate high school and you expect your parents, because everyone else's parents are giving them a new car, that your parents going to get you a new car. It may be a neighbor down the street who has an old car and you've been helping him for years on it, and he may say, you know what, you've done a good job. You've done a good job going through school. Here is a car. Your parents weren't able to afford it. It may not be new, but someone else is giving it to you. That is the simplest way that I can look at it. But this is more than just tangible things that we're talking about. We are talking about love. We may be talking about support. We may be talking about giving you positive feedback. Maybe your family is not going to be able to give that to you. And he says, and Jay says, you can create your own family. And in that creation of your family, you do not negate or disregard your actual family. On page 231, Jay says, people come into your life maybe for a season or for a reason, or to fill a role in your life. And it may be different from their role that you had previously. So that's my takeaway 3. I was about to say 5, but it's 3. So that's my takeaway 3. Takeaway 3 is make your own family. But remember that you are not disregarding your actual family. You are just seeing them for who they are. And you're being realistic about what they're able to give you and to provide for you. Not tangible things. Supports, love, care. Maybe their ability is not there. So you will be able to get it from another family that you create, as in others around you. Takeaway 4. We're moving right along. So takeaway 4 has to do with the opposite sex, or not necessarily the opposite sex, but a partner. So takeaway 4 of part 3 of Jay Shetty's Think Like a Monk is what attracts you to someone. So drop in the comment section. Tell me what attracts you to someone. I'm just curious. Because typically we have a long list of things. Jay says to look for a compatibility, to look for a connection more than a physical attraction, more than an attraction to what they own or have or can buy for you. It is more about your compatibility with that individual and that emotional, spiritual connection that the monks believe that will equal a lasting connection. So that is my takeaway 4. Look for compatibility and look for a connection. Listen, girl, or boy, or guy, listen. Look for that connection. And my final takeaway, if you don't know what you want, you'll send the wrong messages. That's my final takeaway. And this is from Jay Shetty's mouth to this text, to my mouth, to your ears. If you don't know what you want, you will send the wrong message. You need to identify what you want in a partner, not what others or what you've been taught as a child, or that child's view, that childlike mind that we talked about in part one. You remember we talked about the child mind. We're not looking at that. We're growing up now. We're adults, right? So we are looking at what we want and not what others have told us that we need to look for in a partner. But what do we want, so that we can have that emotional, spiritual connection and compatibility? So he talks about the six exchanges, and I will read them. 1 and 2 is given with intention and receiving with gratitude. 3 and 4, listening without judgment and being vulnerable. 5 and 6 is preparing food without an agenda and receiving with presence. So these are all foundation to build in and looking for what you want and making that decision for what you want. So you have to think about that. And takeaway, and my final wrap up takeaway. This is actually not a takeaway 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5. This is just my general takeaway. What a book. I could honestly talk about this book for months, but we can't. But in my previous review of part 2, which was grow, I mentioned briefly about service, and also part of your dharma, and after identifying your purpose, is seeing how useful your purpose is and how useful you are, okay, to your community. And when I say community, I don't think I've ever really explained what community is. Community is where you find like-mindedness. Remember, we talked about that in part 1. Like-minded community of folks. It might be the fact that you go to church and you have a group of like-minded individuals who share the same beliefs. That's your church community, right? It could be YouTubers, for example. They have a YouTube community where they can share ideas with each other, and they could learn different tips and trips to being a content creator, and they gather together. That's their community. Your community is not necessarily where you live. It could be. Community does not have to be location related. It can also be a group of folks with like-minded ideas. So in part of your dharma, part of life is to provide service. And in Jay's book, Think Like a Monk, he talks a lot about living in service. Living not only in your purpose, but also providing service in your community. The happiest feeling comes from living in service to others. Service connects us, and he says it amplifies gratitude. It increases compassion and builds self-esteem. So that is my final thought on Jay Shetty's Think Like a Monk. We've now discussed part 1, part 2, and part 3. Tell me which part you learned the most from, or even just let me know what you thought of the book in general. Tell me if there's something that you wish I would have discussed a little further. Just give me your feedback. Okay, so I want to thank you so much. Please subscribe. Please hit the like button so that I can continue to feel some kind of energy through this service that I am providing. This is just a service. At this point, I felt the need to share this book. I thought it was very, very eye-opening. And he does have another book that I will read. Actually, what am I saying? We'll read. I read. But ultimately, this one is my favorite. Partial to the first one, sorry. But I do have another review coming. It's going to be a little different from this book. So keep an eye out for my next video. And I thank you so much for your time. And I hope that you've learned something, and I hope that you can share this information with others. And if you need more information, certainly you can pull up the book, or you can review one of my videos and see where we talked about part 1, part 2, and this is part 3. And I wish you all the best for the good of the group.